So hopefully that gives you a little bit of confidence as we talk about the next segment, which is going to be the bucket system for the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Let me go ahead and get the, again, so you can follow along with me. There's a link in the description that will bring you to the cheat sheet. You can follow along with me, all that I ask you to do. So here, I'll show you the cheat sheet. Here's the cheat sheet. Go to the file menu, make a copy. That way you can use the filters that I'm going to provide on here. You can also follow along with me on the bucket system tab of this spreadsheet and follow along with me when I go through this. So let's go ahead, pull up the bucket system for this week. And just a reminder, let me remove. Just a reminder how we read these, the bucket system, how we read this page. We are looking at our minimum projection. We round down with whatever numbers in there. So 2.16 for our last year ones rounds down to 2. 3.6 rounds up to 4. So the real projection would be 2 to 4. That's how we do this. And if this was 2.99, it still gets rounded down to 2, as well as if this was 3.01, we still round that up to 4. So keep that in mind. Let me go ahead and hide some of this information. Let me bring in what we really want to be looking at. This is what we do. Yep. Okay. So now that all the important pieces of information are up here, now you won't have access to the information here, but I do want to keep the optimal lineups as a visual point for you. We're looking at bucket totals. You know, how many golfers are in that bucket versus what we see on average every single year. The strength of field points that are going towards that bucket, as well as the percentage of points as a whole that the whole tournament provides. So last year, one bucket, you can see 43% of the strength of field points go towards this bucket, which just increases the projection because it's a high quality bucket based off the strength of field points. And of course, when there aren't a lot of golfers in there, it just kind of proves that, yeah, it's probably a bucket you want to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and just filter out. You can also do this with me. Let's just look at the last year buckets. Now we're going to look at golfers from each of these buckets. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because we're almost already at an hour. But when we look at the last year buckets, one very, very large thing that just points out, very large, is having a top 20 finish here the year before tends to be the most successful predictor of trying to find golfers inside the top 10. 23.29% success rate. This is looking at every golfer that has ever fit in this bucket. How many of them finish inside the top 10? Nearly 25% of them. That is very large. It has a 100% frequency rate. The smallest amount that we've seen is 1, but let me go ahead and pull up the buckets here just to give you a different perspective. That last page, the summary page that we're looking at, takes into account the information that you see here. So you can see that 23.29% that you saw on that page. Like I said, it was almost 25%. It's right here. You see that 1 to 7 and total of 34. You can see all that information right here. 34 total, 1 to 7, 100% frequency success rate. So it's pulling from here. One thing I want you to note, how often do you see less than 4 golfers finish inside the top 10 of a tournament that had a top 20 finish the year before? 2 years, 2016, 2015. I'm sorry. I messed that up. 2017, 2016. Otherwise, we've seen 3 or more every single other year. Sort of what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. 7 of them have had 3 or more golfers from that bucket finish inside the top 10. Now, if I scroll down and take a look at the totals to see if anything might have been different. So this is actually looking at all of the totals from that bucket. No, it's pretty much the same. We had 16 in 2017, 16 in 2016. It is worth noting that, you know, outside of 2022, they are the lowest. It's the lowest volume that we've seen in those buckets, but just by a couple. Like, it's not a lot. So there's nothing really glaring. Like if we were to see single digits from those buckets, we could be like, oh yeah, that makes sense because we don't see a lot of golfers, or, you know, the conversion rate would be insane if we only had like, say, 9 golfers in that bucket and we still had 4, you know, 3 or 4 guys finish inside the top 10. Anyways, so only 2 years have we seen less than 3 from that bucket. So if we go ahead and put a filter on this, again, you can follow along with me and do this. Look at our last year ones. How many do we have? 17, I think. Yeah, 17. 17 golfers from this bucket. What was one of the top things that we saw when we were going over past optimal lineups? It was the fact that we saw a 10K golfer with a top 20 finish inside the top 10 every single year since 2018. Well, since salaries were out for this tournament. So now you could think of that as superstition. You certainly can. But what I'm noticing, DraftKings, their algorithms kind of match a lot of our models that we create. And those models are based off of a lot of course fit, a lot of recent form, golfers that are coming into the tournament hot, golfers that are really good at this golf course, or this tournament, I should say, since there's 3 golf courses. It takes all of that into account. So if that's consistent, if we're seeing consistency with our top price guys finishing inside the top 10 that had a top 20 finish the year before, why would we skip away from that? I make an argument for each, or I want to say every one of these guys. There's only 3. Each of these 3 golfers. Jordan Spieth, hey, doesn't look sexy, right? He's looked pretty awful the last couple weeks. We saw him at Tournament Champions, didn't look super great there. Sony Open was leading day 1 and then just fell apart day 2. Now, we could say maybe that was a weather split. You know, Friday he played in the afternoon when the course baked out, got really firm. Perhaps that's what it was. I think he also putted really poorly that in that tournament, that second day. First day, he obviously putted well. So I don't see why we can't go back to Jordan Spieth. And you want to know something interesting? Last year, when I advocated for Jordan Spieth at this event, I loved the fact that he was erratic, because you don't have to be perfect at Pebble. Pebble is all about creativity, of getting yourself out of trouble, you know, getting yourself out of the bunkers, getting yourself out of the rough. I don't know how thick the rough is this week, but I imagine it's no different from any of the other times he's played here. And he has a pretty darn good track record. He might have one of the best course histories here of having 2 or more events under his belt. So I don't mind that Jordan Spieth hasn't been playing well. Last year, it was one of those things that, again, pushed me onto him. It's like, I like that. I like the fact that he hasn't played well heading into this tournament. And we saw it last year. It worked out. I don't know if that's going to continue this week, because, like, I think Matt Fitzpatrick, I was going to call him Matthew Fitzpatrick. Matt Fitzpatrick just is the guy that obviously everyone likes. He's number 1 in my model. 10-1 is a very, very, very generous price tag. He finished 6th here last year. He doesn't have the greatest course history. 50th place is his average finishing position, which is really interesting. Let me take a look at that. Why is that? I have so many tabs on my spreadsheets, by the way. So I'm pulling up my course history and heading up to Fitzpatrick. So in 2022, that was his best finish, 6th place. Otherwise, he has a 60th and a missed cut. And that's why his average isn't so great. But we could argue that last year, I mean, he won the US Open. We know about the distance gains that he's been doing. His game definitely evolved. So perhaps he's just a better golfer. He's not the same guy as he was in 2020 and 2019. So we could probably just, you know, ignore the other 2 years. I don't mind Matt Fitzpatrick, honestly. I do think he's probably, I mean, honestly, I think him and Spieth are very close 1 and 2. And I wouldn't even argue one golfer over the other. So, I mean, I could easily get on Fitzpatrick. It sounds like most of the community is getting on Fitzpatrick. But then there's also Tom Hoge. which he's the winner last year at this event, so he's the defending champion. He could easily finish inside the top 10 once again. This is a golf course that's tailor-made for him. Doesn't hit the ball super far. Very good with his irons. He's been trending that way as of late. Let me just put a freeze here. And we look at his recent form strokes gain stats. I mean, that approach number is gross. Now, if you watched the podcast I did with Byron, the model maniac, back 9 bets, I talked a lot about when you look at a stat, you need to look at the one that's just left of it. So off the tee and approach, you combine those together, you get ball striking. You'd want to see this over 0. You'd want to see this over probably arguably 0.25 or 0.3. His approach and off the tee. Now these are raw stats. This isn't something that's been weighted. It hasn't been averaged. But looking just at raw stats, like, it's pretty darn good. I should actually double check. No, that is looking at averages. Okay, no, it is looking at averages. I had to remember. So look at that, 1.6, pretty gross over the last 7 weeks. Off the tee is fine. You know, you combine all of these to get your tee to green as well as your, well, you combine them all to get your total. Obviously, his total hasn't been better than most. And if we look at his finishes, he had a 3rd at the Tournament Champions, made the cut at Sony, didn't play super great, and then also made the cut at the American Express, which ended up being just a birdie fest. So he doesn't have terrible recent form coming into here. Has, you know, a good finish last year. It's a good reason to play Tom Hoge. So right away from this bucket, remember, only 2 years have we seen less than 3 golfers from this bucket finish inside the top 10. Otherwise, we've seen 3 or more every single year. So with that being said, hard to fade this, especially when we went over past optimal lineups, where we've seen a 10K golfer with a top 20 finish the year before, which is exactly who these guys are. Seen it every single year since 2018. How do we not? How do you not anchor around one of those guys? I'm not fading that. I'm certainly going to. I'm going to practice what I preach. So, hey, tomorrow when we go through the strategy video and build some lineups, I'm starting here. It's going to be one of those guys. Now, the rest of the golfers here are no slouches either. Like, we have a healthy 9K range. 5 golfers from the 9K range in this bucket. Each one of them can finish inside the top 10, no problem. Even our 8K guys, if we want to include those here, I don't see that being an issue at all. And you can always make the argument that, hey, we could have 4 guys finish inside the top 10 from this bucket. It could be Jordan Spieth, it could be Fitzpatrick, Power, and Putnam, and it really just depends on who places better than each one of them. Because obviously they'll gain those first place points. That's 30 DraftKings points just there. Second place is 20, and it goes down by 2. So, you know, if, say, they finish 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, it's not really going to matter, but it will matter for price tag. You know, Jordan then becomes a worse value based off his 10.6 price tag, whereas Putnam, you know, being $900 cheaper than Spieth, has a better value finishing inside the top 10 than Spieth. But don't worry about that. That, to me, is, I don't know, you're just trying to find the small little advantage or small something that's not worthwhile. I'm trying to remember like the analogy that people usually use, like you're grasping at straws, you know, something along those lines. When we're trying to determine, well, sure, those 4 guys could finish top 10, but I mean, who would you rather have, Power or Putnam, you know, in the top 10, or Spieth or Fitzpatrick? I don't know. Maybe have 2 of those guys in your lineup. I don't see that being an issue. It just helps you overall. So anyways, to me, I'm probably just looking at 8K and above. There are some interesting plays here in the 6 and 7K range, but nothing that I really want to hang my hat on. Like I'm not gonna, Troy Merritt might be the one guy that I really like this week. My rankings have Brendan Todd as someone really good, but I don't think his POA is very great. It's kind of middle of the pack. He's kind of one of the top performers in POA. Interesting. So, hey man, we got some choices here. Like I said, we've seen a 10K golfer with a top 20 finish every single year inside the top 10, dating back to 2018. I don't think we fade this. We don't fade this mold. I think we stick with one of these guys, and then maybe we fit in one of these 9K guys. I don't see an issue with that. I'm not going to spend as much time on the next couple buckets because you can see the projections are very small. So like I said, you round down here, you round up here. We have 0 to 1 in the next 3 buckets, and then we have 0 to 2 in bucket 5. That is because this projection isn't over 2. So although this one is over 1, I want a 2-point buffer between them. And in order to do that, I don't want to increase this up to 3. That'd be foolish. So I say 0 to 2. It's always better to be on the low end. And these are all 0 to 2 as well. Because again, we're including 0 into the number. And then the last one is 1 to 3. So why don't we just go ahead and get through this? I think it's going to be super easy. You know, 0 to 2, the next 4 buckets, and then 1 to 3, that last one. And I'll just talk about notable guys that I see in these. Okay, first one, obviously, when we're going to last year 2s, remember, projection is 0 to 2. It's really 0 to 1. But we see Maverick McNeely. That's obviously the name everyone's going to gravitate towards. But I've heard a lot of love for David Lipsky. I've heard a lot of love for Russell Knox so far. Nate Lashley has been popping up in a lot of people's models. This is weird because, hey, some buckets, the molds can be broken for those buckets. I don't think it does this year. I don't think this is gonna. So if you are in love with like McNeely, Lipsky, Knox, those guys, play up to 2 of them. That's it. That's the max. Don't go more than 2. 0 to 2 is what I'm projecting to be inside the top 10. Hey, one of these guys could finish 11th. They don't finish inside the top 10. It still can help you win a GPP. So although I'm saying don't play more than 2, if you want to go ahead and challenge me, that's fine. You can still win a GPP because no one really gets close to the optimal. You can still win a GPP with a less optimal lineup. But hey man, I'm sticking to 0 to 2. I'll just keep it at that. And I'm sure my optimizer is going to select McNeely a bunch of times because he's 5th in my model. He almost seems like the lock. You know, a lot of people are going to go to McNeely, and there's a good reason to, right? He used to live on property. I think his parents might still have a house here. Remember, he's the billionaire son. A lot of things point towards Matt McNeely this week, so I don't have an issue with that. It's just up to you. Again, this bucket's 0 to 2. There's no certainty that anyone from this bucket's going to finish inside the top 10. No certainty. Whereas the last bucket we talked about, there is certainty. Yeah. Okay. Going to the next one, again, remember, 0 to 2 projected to be inside the top 10 from this bucket. Taylor Pendrith. Very, like, flashy name. I like seeing Pendrith there, but guess what? I don't mind fading him or playing him less than 5% of my lineups. Easy. I get to cross out Pendrith. I could also cross out Riley. I could cross out all of these guys because I don't care to play any of them. 0 to 2, real projection 0 to 1, but again, the 2-point buffer makes it 0 to 2. So keep that in mind. I think you just probably avoid this one without issue. The next one, again, 0 to 2. This is most likely because there's not a lot of golfers in this bucket. And like the only really notable guy is Justin Rose, but Matthew Neesmith is an interesting name. Austin Eckroat as well. And then the next 3 probably don't really have to talk about. Just to confirm, yeah, this is a really, really small bucket. 0 to 1, and it's not even close to getting 0 to 2. Again, we create the 2-point buffer, but I think you don't want more than 1 guy from this bucket. The next one is also a 0 to 2. Remember, it was 1 to 2, but we always drop down. When there isn't a 2-point buffer, we always drop down to 0. This is a really interesting bucket as well, because a lot of good names come from this bucket. And it's going to be hard to fade them just because. You know, like even just looking at POA stats, there's like Kuchar. 9,400, he's 9th in my model. Makes sense. Great on POA. Good top 10 percentage. Course history is not great, but it's whatever. Good reason to fade Kevin Kisner, like I've heard a lot of people saying. Alex Smalley's here, which guy's a stud. He's been playing really good golf lately. Hard to do that. Dean Burmester would be a guy that I was considering. Stallings, Hardy, Kitayama, those are all people. Those are all golfers people have been talking about. Bramlett, Callum Taryn. Oh man, I don't know. It's hard. Just want to double check something. So I'm assuming, yeah, so it's just these top golfers that are really adding the strength of field points to this bucket. So we have 41 in total. That's also what I'm reporting here. Yeah, guys, I mean, it's 0 to 2. Not a high success rate, but one kind of piece of optimism. It's a 77% frequency rate, which means we're looking at every single year that I've recorded stats for this bucket. Frequency rate records how many times at least one golfer from that bucket has finished inside the top 10 for each of those years. 77% means out of 9 years, we've seen 7 golfers finish inside the top 10, which is pretty good. Or I should say, yeah, 7 years, at least one golfer has finished inside the top 10 from this bucket. So although the projection is small, 0 to 2, it wouldn't be unwise to anchor around a golfer from this bucket, especially if you like one of them, you know, quite a bit. Which I think that's probably what I'll do in my optimizer. I'll definitely make sure it selects 1, but I'm going to keep the max to 2. Just crazy. Remember, the next one is 1 to 3 with the last year bucket. Last year bucket 6. So we want 1 to 3 of these guys. And it starts with Victor Hovland, which is really interesting because underneath that is Dietrich and Griffin, which I could argue I would rather play more than Victor Hovland. Oh man, there are some good names here. Like, I really like Ben Taylor at his price tag. I like S.H. Kim this week. Robbie Shelton. I also like Eric Van Rooyen. 1 to 3, yeah, man. I think what I'm going to do this week is going to be fading Victor Hovland. I'm going to put him in probably 10 winner-take-alls, like those 25-cent winner-take-alls. I'll start with Hovland, and then I'll go somewhere else. I'll use the last year 1 anchor bucket still. I'll still put, you know, 1 to 3 golfers in my lineup from there, or 2 to 4, I should say, and then start it with Hovland and just see what it builds me. That way I can get exposure to Hovland, still make a decent amount of, you know, return on my investment if Hovland does well and if I hit the right lineups. Otherwise, I'm kind of cool with fading him. I don't mind it. Because again, I like these guys more. I really like these guys much more than playing Victor Hovland this week. So, up to you guys. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going over all these guys, but you can see a ton of 6K golfers down here. I don't know. I don't know if that's where we get cute. Maybe it is, but I think I'll just avoid that. So that rounds out your last year buckets. Let's go ahead and start talking about our last week buckets. Pretty, how do I say this? I want to say pretty watered down. Not really, because the first 4 buckets, last year 1, last year 2, or sorry, last week 1, last week 2, last week 3, and last week 4, we're projecting 0 to 2 in each of those buckets. So nothing super confident here. Not a lot of golfers in each of those buckets, and not a lot of strength of field points in each of those buckets. So let's just rattle through those really quick. It is worth noting though, last week 1s, we've seen 100% frequency rate, but we're only projecting 0 to 2 to be inside the top 10. So keep that in mind. It's a very high risk bucket, I would say. So remember, 0 to 2 from this bucket. Yeah, and we know why. Justin Rose fits that bucket. Taylor Moore fits that bucket. S.H. Kim, Joseph Bramlett, Justin Suh. Yeah, it's it's easy to consider 0 to 2 golfers from this bucket without even like, you know, when we saw the projection, I was like, that's kind of weird. But looking at the golfers, yeah, I don't mind. I mean, I do like Rose in this situation. No problem. And I was just talking about S.H. Kim from the last year's 6 bucket. Same with Justin Suh. I don't mind Joseph Bramlett. So anyways, 0 to 2 is what I'm projecting to be inside the top 10. I wouldn't play more than 2 guys from this bucket. Up to you, though. You obviously can. We stick with that same projection for our last week 2s. And if I keep saying last year, it's one of those tongue twisters. I mean to say last week. Last week 2s. We want 0 to 2 here. And I don't think this is as frequent. No, 50% frequency rate. This dates back to 2013. So there's actually 10 years of data here, by the way. 10 years of data. 0 to 2. We actually have more than we typically see on average, but strength of field points not super great. Success rate's not super great. Nothing about this bucket is telling us we need to play anyone from here. Which is, again, super interesting because we have a ton of 8K and above golfers in this bucket. Mullinix, Burmester, Ben Griffin, Alex Molly, Thomas Dietrich, and Mav McNeely. You know what? You want to know how this helps me? You know, like Dietrich and Ben Griffin were golfers that from the last year's 6 bucket, I really was considering playing. I still can, but that removes every single one of the other golfers in this bucket from my lineups, which is fine. I don't have to choose Maverick McNeely to be on my lineups, which is great. This is why I like the bucket system. It makes the hard choices for you. You gotta select 0 to 2. Who are you gonna go with? I personally don't mind maybe just going with Griffin or just going with Dietrich and skipping McNeely, skipping Smalley, skipping Mullinax, Griffin, any of those guys. So yeah, 0 to 2. Remember that. That's our projection here. Going to the next last week bucket, which is last week 3s. We want 0 to 2 here as well. Pendrith. He's been in 2 buckets that have not been great. So maybe we cross Pendrith off. Hardy's an interesting name, and then we just drop down into the 6K range pretty quickly. So not really much to talk about with our last week 3s. Let's go to our last week 4s. This rounds out the 0 to 2 projections. And no real notable names here. I mean, Benny Ann, sure. Robbie Shelton, sure. This has always been a bugaboo bucket. That 60 to 80 range, doesn't matter if it's a last year finish or if it's a last week finish, never produces top 10 finishers. Like, I shouldn't say never. It rarely does. So keep that in mind. So we looked at these first 4 buckets. Last week, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're on to 5 and 6. Last week, 5, we're looking somewhere between 1 to 3. 100% frequency rate. 59 guys in that bucket. So yeah, this is a very volume-driven bucket. Last week, 6s did not play is 2 to 5. So the guys that didn't play at the Farmers Insurance Open, this heavily favors. We have seen no less than 3 in this bucket finish inside the top 10 every single year. Again, this goes back to 2013. We have 10 years of data. 3 is the minimum. Now I am projecting 2 to 5. So 2 is on the safe side. I think you want to start with 3. Anyways, we'll start with the last week 5s. 1 to 3 of those guys. And it's the glue of our lineups, basically. We got nothing but 7 and 6K golfers. So I don't have one golfer that I like more than another. I'll let the optimizer decide who to choose. I'll put all the conditionals in there, and then it will spit me out the most optimal lineup based off of, you know, the buckets and the guys we see here. I mean, if you want names from me, I don't mind playing Stallings. I don't mind playing Gordon, Kitayama. Remember that Kitayama, actually all of these guys were in not all of them. We were talking about last year buckets. Like Kitayama and Stallings weren't in a bucket that you really wanted to select from. Neither was Davis Riley. Ben Taylor, I really like. So maybe I just lock in Ben Taylor at $7,200. I don't know. What is his, he's played what? 10 POA events. Hasn't broken inside the top 10 of any of those events, which isn't great. Not really good overall POA. Not very good last year POA, so might pump the brakes on that. And what did he do last week? Off the tee was positive, approach was positive, but his putting was really bad. So that's something that I like to see. Same applies with his recent form stats, his off the tee and approach stats, all really good. So yeah, I could still go to Ben Taylor. It seems like a really good value. And maybe he breaks his POA mold. Maybe he plays well here. Who knows? I don't mind it. Don't mind it at all. But that's it. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. We don't need to dive into that bucket. We'll let the optimizer do its work. Last week, 6s are the last one. 2 to 5 is what we're looking for here. And here are all of the 10K golfers that we could choose from. So this just seems super obvious. Remember, we're looking for 2 to 5. How do we fade a 10K guy? I don't know. I feel like it's almost impossible now that we see this as one of the key buckets. I could see a couple of these guys finishing inside the top 10. So I think you're like, the success rate of you picking one of these guys is pretty high and them finishing inside the top 10. Remember, we want 2 to 5. 3 seems like a pretty safe number to select from. So if you wanted to like start with, I'm going to start with like Fitzpatrick. That's what I'm thinking about. It's like Fitzpatrick, and combining him with like Andrew Putnam or Seamus Power seems pretty good in my opinion. Like I'm really liking Seamus Power this week. Going there, and or even Keith Mitchell. I don't mind that. Like seems pretty decent. But let's say we go with one of these two guys. Let's just say Seamus Power. So I'm guessing Fitzpatrick Power lineups are going to be very popular. That's fine. I don't care because we can make up elsewhere. Nate Lashley seems like a good fill-in. And in the 8K range, I don't mind going to Eric Van Rooyen. I bet you anything going to an Eric Van Rooyen gives me all the leverage that I need. If Fitzpatrick and Power are going to be extremely popular, I bet you no one plays Eric Van Rooyen. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Could be. I feel like a lot of people will go to Webb. Seems like a pretty good fit here, although he's pretty awful in my model. Lipsky seems like a pretty good person to go to as well. So that's like that takes care of the 8K range. Yeah, low 7 for me would be Nate Lashley. He was in a bucket that you didn't want to select too many guys from. I like Brandon Wu. I like Troy Merritt. So I don't mind a lot of these guys. I have no issue playing any of them. Yeah, 2 to 5 though is what we're projecting out of this bucket. All right, moving on. We go from our last week buckets to our course history buckets. And this almost every single, this actually changed. This is different. I was gonna say almost every single week we see like 1 to 3 from the top 3 buckets, or not the top 3, 1 to 3 from these middle buckets, but we don't. We have 0 to 2 last, or 0 to 2 course history 1s, 1 to 3 course history 2s, 2 to 5 course history 3s, 0 to 2 course history 4s, and then basically 0 to 2 for the other 2 as well. So let's see here. We have 0 to 2 on our top, the course history 1 bucket, and then course history 4, 5, and 6, and then it mixes in. Okay, let's see if I can remember that. Course history 1. Remember, we want 0 to 2 from this. Jordan Spieth, Taylor Moore, Marcel Siem. Siem? I think that's how you say his name. Interesting. I didn't know he was in the field. 0 to 2, yeah. So there's 3 golfers in that bucket, which is really interesting because we've seen 100% frequency rate of golfers from this bucket finishing inside the top 10. Again, frequency rate means at least one guy every single year that I've done the course history buckets has finished inside the top 10. Which, does that happen this year? My projection isn't very kind of that happening. We usually see 8 golfers from that bucket. We only have 3. It's not super great, but if you just believe in the bucket gods, if you want to call it that, there's a really good argument to make for Jordan Spieth. And if you didn't like Jordan Spieth, fill him in with Taylor Moore. Fill it in with Taylor Moore. Or take a huge bullet with Marcel Sim. Crazy. Super crazy, man. Like, Taylor Moore just actually pops out a lot more. And I don't really care to play Taylor Moore, honestly. He's very close to being in the blacklist for me. But I guess not terrible, right? I guess not terrible. So that's an interesting one. Interesting to see the 100% frequency rate. A lot of things are pointing Jordan Spieth. Course history 2, we're looking for 1 to 3 golfers from here, or at least that's what we're projecting to be inside the top 10. Victor Hovland fits this bucket. Looks like he only has 1 finish on his belt and it's 38th place. So I don't know what you want to do with that. He obviously hasn't been showing up in the buckets that we want to see with last year or last week. So I think it's just getting easier to fade him. Same goes with like Maverick McNeely. I don't mind. Yeah, we want 1 to 3. 1 to 3 golfers from this bucket. I guess it could be any of these guys. You know, I mean, they're all in other buckets that are like 0 to 1, 0 to 2 that you would want to grab from, and they easily could be the guy. And even if you selected one of these guys, so if it was Maverick McNeely, it still satisfies the projection of how many golfers we think are going to be inside the top 10. So there's no obvious choice for me here. I'm just going to let the optimizer do its work tomorrow in the strategy video and see who we'll pick from here. I imagine it's going to stick with the cheaper golfers, you know, like Neesmith or even Sig, Will Gordon, Lonto Griffin, Scott Stallings. I think it'll probably go somewhere with those guys. I don't know. We'll see. I don't mind playing McNeely or Rose. I don't. The buckets aren't really loving them, but it's still all a possibility that these guys can finish inside the top 10, obviously. Moving on from there, going to course history 3. This is going to be the bucket we want to select from the most. 2 to 5 is the projection to finish inside the top 10. Most of our strength of field points are going here. There are 46 golfers in that bucket this year where we normally see 35. So that's probably a big indicator as to why the projection is so large. This starts with Fitzpatrick, and it has Hoagie in it as well. So it's really interesting, right? Because we were just talking about course history 1 buckets and how that has 100% frequency rate. I could see us starting with like Fitzpatrick or Hoagie and anchoring them in with Taylor Moore. I think lineups would work that way. Or we go with Jordan Spieth, and we already talked about anchoring, like, oh, we talked about Fitzpatrick and Power together. What if we go Jordan Spieth and Power together? That seems pretty reasonable. Again, we're looking 2 to 5, so you could go Fitzpatrick and Power from this bucket. Very easy. Now, Kurt Kitayama hasn't been in a lot of our good buckets, but hey, putting him here and then, you know, having the optimizer sort things out, that's fine. Same goes with Nate Lashley. It's going to be really interesting to see what the optimizer does. It could break. It just feels like there are so many limited options with some of these guys where it's like, if you did go with Kitayama, you take out a bunch of other guys, you know, like a lot of other higher priced guys, which are more easy to build your lineups around than a lot of these 7 and 6K golfers. So I don't know, 2 to 5, remember, from this bucket. And there are a lot of golfers in it. The next one to look at, course history 4s, 0 to 2, and it's course history, I'm sorry, for the next 3 course history buckets, the projections are 0 to 2. So let's just keep that in mind. Course history 4 starts with Davis Riley, Ryan Palmer, golfer that I like, Ben Taylor. Now, I think I'm just going to skip this bucket. I don't think there's much to talk about. It looks like a lot of glue can be created from here, or it can be used, because a lot of these guys just provide salary relief for you, and the projection is 0 to 2. So maybe you don't want to pick anyone from here. That's totally fine. Going to the next one with course history 5s. Again, it's 0 to 2 from here. This one's a little bit more interesting because Smalley and Burmester are 8K and above. Nick Hardy is talked about quite a bit. Justin Suh. Just to double check, frequency rate 75%. That's not terrible. So to 10 years, I think course history would be last 8 years. So this is 6 out of 8 years that we've seen one guy at least inside the top 10 from this bucket. But yeah, 0 to 2, nothing is very obvious of, you know, picking golfers from here. I don't ever really reference the optimal lineup portion of this, but 40% frequency rate of being inside the optimal lineup. So it's not a super great bucket to grab from, and you don't want more than one, period. So when you look at this, hard, right? Because it's like, you can mix up like 3 of these guys or 4 of these guys pretty darn easy. I mean, like the salaries just work out really well. 87, 84, 77, 73. You could still add a 10K golfer to that. You could still add a 9K golfer to that. You might even go 10-9 with 2 8s and these 2 7s and maybe grab a low 6K if it's possible. I don't know if it is. So yeah, there's still like lineup opportunities you can do here. Now, I wouldn't advocate for that. I would just stick with the bucket projections. Entirely up to you guys though. I'm okay with just playing one of these guys, maybe 2, but that's it. I mean, my eyes instantly gravitate to these 2 guys. Yeah, Smalley's been a guy that a lot of people talked about. I think he's a decent play. Not super great POA stats. In fact, none of these guys have super good POA stats. Justin Lauer does. Just kind of looking at some of these. This is last week's off the tee and approach. That's kind of what I like to look at the most. Yeah, Smalley, positive approach, and off the tee, love that. Same with Nick Hardy. Not so much with Justin Suh, but good approach stats. And also looking at recent form, off the tee and approach. Yeah, Smalley is positive in both. Burmester's just playing up to what he normally does, good off the tee. And Nick Hardy has good approach stats. Only Justin Suh is like kind of the only iffy one. And then season long, what does Justin Suh do? Positive off the tee, negative on approach. Interesting. We've been seeing the inverse of that. So maybe he's kind of erratic with his driver right now, and it's causing him to have better approach stats. Nick Hardy, though. Hardy or Smalley just seems like a more... They just seem like a safer play because of their strokes gain stats. And Hardy's really the... If I'm pulling everything in together, despite Burmester having a better ranking than Hardy, I just see the grass stats as kind of the equalizer for me. Just stats in general, last week, last 7 weeks, season long, all of it kind of points towards Hardy. If you really needed a guy from this bucket, that'd be my highest confidence guy. But yeah, we don't want more than one, so keep that in mind. And then course history 6, these are golfers who've never played this tournament before. And by the way, course history buckets should really be called tournament history this week because there are 3 golf courses. It's hard to say course history. But the guys who have not played here, we project 0 to 2. Not a high frequency rate of finishing inside the top 10. Not a high success rate. Never been in the optimal lineup. So maybe you just avoid this bucket and be just fine with it. I might just put this 0 to 1, which is super interesting because look at who we see. Dietrich, Ben Griffin, EVR, Robbie Shelton, like a lot of good names. If this bucket still holds up to have 0 guys in the optimal lineup, I'm going to be impressed because just the 5 golfers that I've highlighted are golfers that I've thought about playing, that I'm really interested in playing. Now, you can still win a GPP with 1 or 2 of these guys in your lineup. But man, it doesn't look good. I think I'm going to set this to 0 to 1 in the optimizer and have it build me lineups. It does say 0 to 2, and even the more conservative number is higher. So it's really trying to suggest, hey, keep an open mind to have at least 2 guys in your lineup. Or at least 2 spots available for one of these golfers or 2 of these golfers. Okay, that's fine. I guess I'll keep it 0 to 2. I want to close it to 0 to 1 because I do firmly believe in the yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put it 0 to 1. if I choose Griffin, that means I'm knocking out Dietrich and the rest of these guys. If I choose Dietrich, I'm knocking the rest of these guys out. If I choose EVR, I'm knocking out Dietrich, Griffin, and the rest. Like, that's fine. I'm going to stick to my guns. Let's just do it. Have faith in the bucket system. Moving on from there, we're going to go to recent form buckets. Nothing really to see here. It seems pretty open. 1 to 3 last year, or sorry, 1 to 3 recent form 1s, 0 to 2 recent form 2s, 1 to 3 recent form 3s, 0 to 2, 0 to 2, 0 to 2 for the rest of them. So nothing really stands out. 100% frequency rate for these middle 3 buckets. So recent form 2, 3, and 4. And only recent form 3 and 4 have optimal lineup. Golfers that have been in the optimal lineup from this bucket every single year. So let's go ahead and get into that. So first starting with recent form 1s, which are going to be your best recent form. Guys coming into this tournament with an average of a top 20 finish. That is exactly what this means. Not a lot of them, and they're all 8K and above, really 9K and above except for Erik van Rooyen. Yeah, Victor Hovland, Matt Fitzpatrick, Andrew Putnam, Maverick McNeely, and Matt Kuchar. So our projection was what? 1 to 3. It's a very low max projection for 2.05, but the rules are the rules. You always round up to 3 in this scenario. So 1 to 3. So grabbing one from here, which just kind of screams out, start Fitzpatrick. So far as I've been going through this, it's been Fitzpatrick or it's been Spieth. One of the two. And sure, Matt McNeely has been showing up too. And this actually opens up Jordan Spieth McNeely lineups, but you could technically grab up to 2 golfers from here. I mean, I should say this. 2 is what I'm projecting to be inside the top 10 at a maximum. It's possible. And it's possible it could be Hovland and Fitzpatrick. It could be Fitzpatrick and McNeely. That's not to say there aren't other 9 and 10K golfers that can't finish inside the top 10 as well. But if you wanted to just start here, I'll never criticize you for it, because if your 2 guys finish inside the top 10, that's what we're looking for. So anyways, 0 to 2, kind of a strong emphasis of picking at least 1, right? Oh, I'm sorry, 1 to 3. Sorry, 1 to 3. Yeah, I just remembered it was just over 2. 1 to 3 is what we want. Wow. I kind of fell in love with like a Jordan Spieth power start, but I could go power, or I could go Fitzpatrick power, or even Fitzpatrick McNeely, or maybe even like Jordan Spieth McNeely, and maybe toss in Erik van Rooyen. All super interesting. Now, of course, Van Rooyen is in the 0 course history bucket, or course history 6, which is not a good one to be in. So I don't know. That'll be interesting to see what the optimizer does. Recent form 2, this one was a big one, right? No, 0 to 2 from here. And it starts with Hoagie power. We were just talking about power. Justin Rose, Dietrich, Griffin. So when I see 0 to 2, and it's kind of like hinting towards you want at least 1. 100% frequency rate, by the way. High success rate. Less golfers than we normally see. So that's probably what's really driving this down. Yeah, I don't mind selecting one of these guys and moving on. I'll tell you one thing. Although Hoagie's been showing up in some of these buckets where it's like, yeah, you want at least 1, and he's usually one of the better golfers from the bucket, I can easily fade him this week because I really like power that much more. And if I didn't really care to play power in all my lineups, then I don't mind dropping to a Rose, Dietrich, or Griffin. Although most of those buckets only tell me play only one of them. This is a week where the optimizer, I think, is going to shine. Just finding the 2 guys you want to anchor around and going from there is going to help a lot. I believe this is the recent form 3 bucket that we're going to next. That is the one where we want 1 to 3. And there's Jordan Spieth. Just makes it a little easier to say, hey, pick Jordan. because then it drops. The salary ranges drop, and it's not even on golfers that we really want. We've already talked ourselves off of like Alex Smalley, Dean Burmester. We didn't talk ourselves off of Taylor Moore though. Remember that one bucket that Spieth and Moore were in? Which one was it? Course History 1? Where it's like you want one guy from this bucket, but or it's like 0 to, I forget, what was it? Oh, the frequency rate was 100%, but the projection was 0 to 2. Do we select one of these guys and it fulfills this bucket, and maybe we select another guy, or maybe we, I don't know if we play both of them. I almost think this is a if or statement. If Spieth, well, it would be if and then statement. If Spieth, then not Moore, or if Moore, then not Spieth. So that's interesting. And then we also have Nick Hardy here. Remember, we want 1 to 3, so we can get up to 3 guys that we want to put in our lineups. Ben Taylor's, yeah. There's a lot of names that I'm looking, that I've already kind of had my eyes on, that I'm seeing in these buckets that are like, yep, you got to be. Now we got to be a little strict when building our lineups. So yeah, 1 to 3 recent form 3s. We've seen 1 to 3 inside the optimal lineup. Yeah, that's fine. And now 0 to 2 for the rest of these. Now there is a 100% frequency rate with this next one, so recent form 4s. Pendrith is up there. We've kind of already crossed Pendrith off. Kitayama seems really interesting to play. Remember, 100% frequency rate, but the projection is actually 0 to 2. So we could go with one of these guys and just move on. I don't care which one it is. I'll let the optimizer do the work. And in all honesty, for how many golfers we have 41. If I were to just put the exposure settings to 2%, like I don't want more than 2% of any of these guys, it's just going to mix and match pretty easy. And the optimizer is what I'm talking about. So if anything, I probably like Troy Merritt the most. Kitayama is probably second. And then I just don't know from there. I almost don't care. Like I don't mind Will Gordon, but this doesn't seem like a track that's really set up for him. Doesn't matter. I'll let the optimizer do its work. Recent form 5, 0 to 2. Same goes with recent form 6s. In all reality, I could probably just skip these buckets. That includes Webb Simpson, Matthew Neesmith. That's fine. I don't have to play anyone from here. Hoffman, Charlie Hoffman is in my dummy lineup. I'm probably gonna have to change that. I thought just name value alone seemed pretty good. Has a decent POA history, but not super great when it comes to course history. Looks like he had a withdrawal last year or a DQ, one of the two. Usually only include these stats if they start a tournament and don't finish it, not if they don't show up. So I'd have to double check to see if that's the case here. Yeah, 0 to 2 with good reason. Not a lot of good golfers in this bucket. And then the last one is also 0 to 2 for the recent form 6s. So Joel Damon's in this bucket, hasn't played this calendar year. I don't know what it's from. I think he had a baby. I think that's the main reason. But him and Kisner are really the only notable names. The rest of these guys are just dart throws, lotto tickets, whatever you want to call them. We have talked about Marcel Siem already, so he was in that bucket with both Jordan Spieth and Taylor Moore. The 100% frequency bucket was just those 3 guys, but the projection was 0 to 2. So it's like, do you go with the 100% frequency and say there's going to be at least one golfer from that bucket this year to be in it, or is this a year it breaks? Maybe it's not Spieth, maybe it's not Moore, maybe you want Marcel Siem, 6,500. I don't like this bucket whatsoever. I don't care to play Damon. I've never been a Damon guy. Seems like a good course for him because he's a short ball hitter, more focuses on, you know, approach than anything. I don't care. I don't feel like I'm losing out if I don't play Joel Damon. And same goes with Kevin Kisner. I could just see myself completely fading this bucket. So that wraps up the recent form buckets. Now, the next one to talk about really would be your salary buckets, but we already kind of went over this. during the pass optimal lineup and GPP winning lineups. Talked about how there's been at least one 10K golfer in every single lineup in the optimal lineup, as well as the GPP winning lineup. You can see that information right here. There's been at least one 10K, one 9K, and one 7K in every single optimal lineup dating back to 2018. Now, that also includes a sweet spot optimal. So keep that in mind. It feels like you want to start 10K, 9K, no matter what. And then obviously, naturally, just put in a 7K in your lineup. Now, I will say this, with the 7Ks, it does show 2 to 4. Our conservative max projection is actually 3, and you want a 2-point buffer. So what I would do with this bucket is actually change the minimum from 1 or from 2 to 1 and just keep the maximum at 4. There's going to be a 3-point buffer between that, just because the conservative max projection is not super great. Now, when you look at that 10K range, it's still pretty high. 1 to 3 is the projection to be inside the top 10. That's not changing. 9K stays the same, 1.93, 1.95, which means technically that's 0 to 2. We have seen 100% frequency rate inside the top 10. We've actually at least seen 2 every single year inside the top 10, and at least 1 in the optimal lineup every single year. So keep that in mind. And another thing to mention, to point out, there's only been a maximum of 1 golfer from the 10K range inside the top, or in the optimal lineup. So playing 2 10K golfers this year, probably not ideal. It's not to say you can't, because the projection is saying 1 to 3 probably will finish inside the top 10. But I think how the rest of the salary construction might shake out this year, you might not be able to do it. So probably avoid that. I'm not going to really mention the rest of them. Like the 6K range isn't super ideal, and neither is the 8K range. So it might not be a week to pepper the 8K range, Chad. Maybe we don't do it. Although the frequency rate is almost 100%. I think since 2018, it's 5 years. Over the last 5 years, we've seen at least 4 of them having 1 8K golfer inside the top 10. But a 40% frequency rate of being the optimal lineup, which isn't super great. That's 2 out of 5 years. And the max is only 1. So having more, not great, but also we did see a GPP winner have 3 8K golfers in it. I don't remember when it was. Obviously, check out the GPP/optimal lineup section of this video, or just the original video that or not original, but the short video that I created for it. Check that out and see it there. But I'm going to move on from salaries. Last bucket to talk about are our strokes gained buckets. You want to know how this is comprised, because I still have a numbering system 1 to 6, but there are different definitions. Check out the bucket system video that I have in the description below. That'll explain all about it, because I do things a little bit differently. I don't want to spend time explaining it. So strokes gained 1, 0 to 2. Go ahead and take a look. These are when all stats are positive when it comes to strokes gained stats over the last year. Fitzpatrick's in it. Dietrich, Griffin. I mean, we want 0 to 2. We've seen 100% frequency rate inside the top 10. Not in the optimal lineup, though. I think 3 out of 4 years we've seen a golfer from this bucket to be in the optimal lineup. That's cool, because, like, I don't mind just playing Fitzpatrick and moving on. I can skip the rest of these guys. And if it's not Fitzpatrick, if I go Jordan Spieth, I don't mind playing any of these other guys. Remember, some of these guys are in buckets that are not super great. So this might be, like, if we can grab the right 2 guys, anchor around them, and let the optimizer do all of its work, it might be, if the buckets beat out the GPP winning lineup, this could be our best shot at taking a GPP down by following the buckets, just because of how strict it's looking to become. Strokes gained 2. We're looking at somewhere between 1 to 3, 100% frequency rate, 100% frequency rate in the optimal lineups. So definitely grabbing a golfer from here seems to be the way to go. 1 to 3 is what we're looking for. Hovland and Hoagie, yeah, I could probably skip those guys pretty easy, because we've already been talking about Fitzpatrick and Spieth a ton, which makes me more excited about people like Power, potentially McNeely, Taylor Moore. If we don't go Spieth, Moore seems even more in play. Nick Hardy, great play. Justin Suh, don't mind that. S.H. Kim, talked about him a bunch. I don't mind that. And some of these other guys down here that we consider glue, like Troy Merritt, another good choice. So projection was 1 to 3 from that bucket. We're going to strokes gained threes, which we also want 1 to 3. 50% frequency rate to be inside the optimal lineup, but 100% rate of being inside the top 10, which means starting with Jordan Spieth might not be the best case. 1 to 3 though is what we want. Spieth to me just takes the cake. We've already talked about fading Pendrith and Smalley and Burmester pretty in length. We just talked about Damon, how we didn't quite like him. Now with the rest of the guys down here, I don't know how we going with that. So when I look at the projection, 1 to 3, we've seen one inside the top 10 every single year. So frequency rate 100%, but 50% frequency rate to be in the optimal lineup, which is kind of telling us like we could see multiple 10K golfers inside the top 10. Jordan Spieth could be a guy that finishes inside the top 10th or top 10, but finishes 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th place and is not in the optimal lineup. That's exactly what this reads. When the frequency rate is 50% in optimal lineups, but 100% in top 10s, that's exactly the narrative that's playing out. Spieth could finish top 10, but not in the optimal lineup. And if we're chasing the optimal lineup, that means we're not going with Jordan Spieth, which means I might anchor my lineups. Well, so we're doing the, I'm trying to, you remember that bucket we were just talking about, the course history ones, where Spieth, Taylor Moore, and Marcel Siem are in it. We could go Fitzpatrick and Taylor Moore, anchor around those guys, and then build lineups from there. See what it spits out. The only thing that I have an issue with that is looking at this bucket right now, what you see on the screen. I don't like anybody not named Jordan Spieth. Like, if I'm going to put a weighting scale to this, Jordan Spieth will get 70 points out of 100, and maybe even more, maybe 75 points out of 100 of the players that I'd rather play. And then I'd probably allocate 2 to 3 points to Smalley, Burmester, Pendrith, Lipsky, Gordon, Bramlett, and Neesmith. And then it's 1 or less for the rest of the guys. So it's like, it's Jordan Spieth out of this bucket or bust. And if the projections hold up 1 to 3, I still would want to go with Spieth. Like, even if he finishes 10th place, I'm okay with that. I don't care if he's the top price guy and he gives me a 10th place finish. I'm looking to get 6 of my guys inside the top 10. That still covers that. So might galaxy brain ourselves here, but hey, it's fun to talk about. Strokes gained 4. 100% frequency in the optimal lineups. 40 golfers in that bucket this year. 36 on average. Projection is 0 to 2. I mean, the minimum is over 1, which is like, hey, this is actually not a bad choice, but it is a volume-driven bucket, and that's probably why it's not super. I mean, that's probably why the projection is actually as high as it is. Because if it didn't have 40 golfers in it and say it had 20, it would definitely plummet down to 0 to 2. Really easy. So remember, 100% frequency rate. Actually, I didn't see. Was it also, or I don't remember. Was it also 100%? Yeah, it's 100%. 100% frequency rate in the optimal lineup. 75% in the top 10. That's interesting. And this starts with Putnam, Matt Kuchar, Denny McCarthy, 3 notable 9K golfers. Interesting. I don't like this bucket. I don't like the guys at the top, so I'm really not going to anchor around any of these guys. If the optimizer just selects them, that's fine. Like if I went with like Matt Fitzpatrick and then Taylor Moore, you know, because that's just something I've been talking about this whole video. It could naturally get to one of these guys in the 9K range. You know, it could easily get to Putnam, Kuchar, or even a Denny McCarthy because Taylor Moore's 8,300. Spieth is 10-6, or not Spieth, Matt Fitzpatrick is 10-1. That gives salary relief or comfort to grab one of these 9K guys. Outside of that, I mean, this is a very gross bucket. Golfers that I just don't care to play. Now, technically, this bucket, this is negative off the tee plus positive putting. So if I actually scroll over to the stroke gain stats, we look at off the tee, you're going to see all these guys are negative off the tee, but they're all positive with putting. That seems like if you were to create a strokes gain model for this tournament, what would be the most beneficial? It would be, you could be negative off the tee, but you'd want to be positive with approach and positive with putting. Like, that's what would fit the narrative of this golf course or of this tournament. So with that being said, you could certainly go that route. I'm probably just going to avoid it, honestly. I don't like it. The next buckets aren't really worth talking about. I mean, yeah, they probably are because they're going to have people in them, but you want 0 to 2 from here. Nick Taylor, strokes gain 5. Eric Van Rooyen, Russell Knox. Yeah, I probably will stay away from this bucket if I can. 0 to 2 is the projection, which is really interesting. Our frequency rate of being inside the top 10 is 75%, as is the optimal lineup, which is weird. It's scary. This is negative off the tee, negative putting. I suppose maybe guys that have good approach, this will play into their hands, but yeah, I don't know. I don't mind playing Nick Taylor. I've already talked about how I like Eric Van Rooyen. I made a dummy lineup with Charlie Hoffman in it. And I don't mind Russell Knox. So the top 4 guys in this bucket, you know, in the salaries, I don't mind playing whatsoever. But yeah, I'm probably limiting myself to one of these guys, no more. I don't care. Yeah, just no more. And then strokes gain 6, same story. This is actually even worse. There's only 6 golfers in this bucket. Probably can avoid at all costs. Yeah, no one we really know, not worth even discussing. So that wraps up the bucket system. That wraps up this video. Just to remind you of some giveaways. If you didn't already know, I do a weekly and a monthly giveaway. This video and tomorrow's video and all the other small videos that I'll create with those two, all will go towards this monthly giveaway, the January monthly giveaway, which I'll run during next Monday's video. So someone, if we can get to the subscriber goal of 500 subscribers all the way over there, I will give away $50 to anyone who has participated on my channel over this last month. Otherwise, I'm going to give away a t-shirt that has the logo that you see on the sweatshirt, just not mirrored, obviously. So that's, I'm going to be giving something out away, or something out away. I'm going to give something to something away to somebody, whether it's $50 or it's a t-shirt, one of the two, for the monthly giveaway. So if you want a chance to win, comment on the video, be subscribed, and that's it. And comment on any of the other videos I post this week, because that also goes to next week. We're also doing a weekly giveaway. So I'll be running a monthly giveaway next week, as well as a weekly giveaway, giving out a t-shirt or $50, one of the two, depending if we hit that subscriber goal of 500 subscribers before next Monday. Keep that in mind. Hopefully you follow along with me with the cheat sheet. I had that one available. There's a link in the description for that. And then, of course, prize picks. If you want to play this for free and you're in a state that allows it, use the link in the description to get to the sign up page. It'll already populate the SweetSpot promo code in there. Sign up with that and put at least $20 in your account, and I will send you $20 back. Super simple, and prize picks will match your deposit up to $100. So 20 turns into 40, only costs you the initial sign up information as well as the initial deposit. Super simple. Highly encourage you guys to do so, and thank you for doing it as well. And that would be it. So 2 hours down. Tomorrow's probably gonna be 3 hours with the strategy video. That's coming out at 8 p.m. We'll be live with that one. Come in with some lineup ideas. I'll construct some lineups using the optimizer, and we'll go from there. All right, I got nothing else for this one. Thank you for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, bye.